Let's talk about how you can elevate your LinkedIn profile for your professional personal brand. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. We love to say that we don't judge a book by a cover, but we do, and the research supports this. It shows that first impressions can be formed within as quickly as a tenth of a second. For example, in one of the research pieces that was conducted by Princeton University, participants were shown photographs of strangers. And what it showed was that the longer that they were exposed to that particular photograph, the more they doubled down on their initial judgment of that person. And the highest correlation came with trustworthiness. And it indicated that as humans, we are hardwired for making really swift judgments when it comes to trustworthiness. This contributed to our survival for many, many years, and it's something that is still ingrained in us. So when it comes to something like your LinkedIn profile, keep in mind that people are judging your trustworthiness as a potential employee, as a potential contact, as a potential that they want to work with for the service that you might provide. So how can you elevate your LinkedIn profile? Let's dive into tip number one. Tip number one is dress for the job that you want. You want to use your LinkedIn profile to match the vibe of the kind of career that you want for yourself, the opportunities that you are trying to attract, and the contacts that you are trying to attract. Some of the ways that you might do this is consider a few options as to the general theme of your wardrobe for your LinkedIn profile photo. This might be, for example, a business professional look. This is where you might go for more tailored suits and shirts and skirts and a much more traditional corporate look that is going to have more of a conservative audience, for example. Or you might go for a business casual look. So this might be a more relaxed take on the more traditional professional look. So this might be more about button-down shirts and more casual looking clothes as opposed to a really sort of stiff corporate look. You may also go for a casual look, and this is one that you want to use cautiously because you want to make sure that you are still coming across as credible. Now, this sort of really casual look is going to be pretty popular in certain industries. For example, if you are in a cool sort of tech vibe startup industry, this might be a look that you go for. But as I mentioned, keep in mind that this could affect your credibility, and this is supported across different research pieces as well. It shows that when you dress a little bit more formally, people perceive you as being more credible. So if you are going for a more casual look, just ask yourself if you can still convey your credibility and your authority and expertise through that particular look. And on the flip side, if you go for something that is too far away from what your industry is doing, then you're not matching the vibe. So make sure that you find a nice in between that most matches your audience but also conveys your credibility. My tip number 2 is to match online you with real life you. Your LinkedIn profile sets the expectation for your professional personal brand's visual appearance, especially if someone doesn't actually know you. So when they meet you for the first time face to face, you want to make sure that you are matching the online brand that you have presented to them as closely as possible. You would expect this from corporate brands, for example. You want the real life experience to be what was advertised. So when you are picking your LinkedIn profile or when you are planning your LinkedIn profile photo, make sure that it is as authentically linked to your natural personal style as it can be, so that when you are turning up to a meeting, it closely reflects the expectations that have already been set. Because if it doesn't, then this has the potential to be distracting. It has the potential to break trust. If, for example, we assumed that a person looked a certain way or presented themselves in a certain way, and then they turn up in real life and it feels quite different to our expectation, then we are distracted and we feel like we have been somewhat misled in the information that we have already received. So while it may seem like a really small thing, try and take away anything that could potentially be distracting. Now, this is where I would suggest, for example, trying to make sure that you keep your LinkedIn profile as up to date as possible. You don't need to be updating this all the time, but if, for example, you have a photo that is years out of date and then people see you and you look potentially quite different to that photo, that is an example of something that could be distracting. They're thinking more about how their expectation didn't match up to reality more than they are actually in that conversation, just completely present in those crucial initial seconds when you are first meeting. I would also be as pedantic as suggesting that if you have, for example, dramatically changed your hairstyle or maybe your hair color, that you even take the time to update your LinkedIn profile in this case. Again, to take away any elements that could be distracting when people meet you in real life. And with hairstyles in mind, this is also something to keep in mind when you are thinking about your style of your LinkedIn photo, is that different hairstyles can convey different things. For example, a really straight hairstyle, if you have a bit more hair to work with, can convey a more sleek impression, whereas a wavy hairstyle can be more friendly and approachable and relaxed, and a more curly hairstyle can come across as more self-expressive, for example. So that's just something to keep in mind when it comes to your hairstyles in your photos too. But again, make sure that your hairstyle that you choose matches the reality that people are most likely to see. I actually go as far as making sure that in my online meetings with people that I am dressing as much as possible to the style that I have presented in my personal brand photos, because I want people to feel comfortable with the brand that they already understand. My tip number 3 is to take an engaging LinkedIn photo. Now let's talk about some of the ways that you might be able to do this. This first one is going to be something that maybe not everyone agrees with, but I personally prefer a smiling LinkedIn photo because we are social creatures, we're tribal creatures. So when people view our LinkedIn profile and say we are a potential contact or a potential employee, or we are someone that they want to work with professionally, we have to keep in mind that they are asking themselves, does this person have all the necessary skills and qualities to be able to do this job? Of course. But they're also asking themselves, will I like this person? Will I want to work with this person? Will I enjoy interacting with this person? And this is where I think, although a serious face can come across as really competent and credible, I do think a smile just comes across as more inviting. You are inviting people into that relationship. But when you are smiling for your LinkedIn profile, just make sure that you make this as genuine as it can be. So you don't want to have just a pasted on grin. Keep in mind that as humans, we are able to perceive microfacial expressions. So when you smile with just your mouth, for example, this can come across as disingenuous. Whereas when you smile with your whole face, when you think about something that actually genuinely lights you up, or when you see that expression on other people, you see your face lift in all areas. It's not just your mouth that moves for your smile. So when you are taking your LinkedIn photo, try and make sure that you are smiling with your whole face so that it comes across as more genuine to the people that you are trying to connect with. The other thing to consider as well is your posture. So don't just think about your face and your facial expressions. Think about how you are taking a photo with your whole body. How are you actually conveying a posture that is confident, for example, and that you are sitting up straight and that you're alert and paying attention? The general rule of thumb is that if you are taking a LinkedIn photo, you are taking it with your head and your shoulders predominantly. I personally like to squeeze in a little bit more because I think that that gives you a better opportunity to be able to add in a little bit more of your personal brand. For example, if you can take elements of your office and showcase that in your brand, just the little details in that will add a little bit more personality to your LinkedIn profile. Maybe you have plants, maybe you have an office that depicts more of your personal style or the business that you represent. But I like to use the background as an opportunity to just tell a little bit more of a story. But you want to make sure that you are doing this cautiously because backgrounds can also be distracting. So make sure that you try and keep this as minimal as possible while also just telling little bits of stories where you can and adding to your professional personal brand. Finally, if you are using your smartphone to take your LinkedIn profile photo, make sure that you aren't just taking it on selfie mode holding your hand because that just doesn't look great on a LinkedIn profile. It just doesn't look professional. It works on other social media platforms, but on LinkedIn, it just doesn't feel right. So if you can, try and get a friend or a family member to help you take that photo, or just use something that you can stand your smartphone up on and use the timer mode on your smartphone to be able to take the photo. Maybe you have a little tripod that you can use. But when you are taking your photo, and if you are using selfie mode, just remember to look into the lens as opposed to looking at yourself on the screen. Because if you just shift your eyes ever so slightly into the lens, then you are connecting more directly with your audience. You're looking into their eyes instead of looking at yourself. And it is just the slightest difference that has a big impact. Tip number 4 is to do a simple edit to elevate your LinkedIn profile. Now, most of us are usually taking our LinkedIn profile photos on our smartphone, but that doesn't mean that you can't give it a little lift to make it look more professional. And Canva, for example, makes this incredibly easy to do. And you can just jump into Canva using one of their free accounts and just with a few clicks, elevate the quality of your profile. One of the things that I recommend focusing on is contrast, because contrast is what creates visual interest in a photo. It makes the most important aspect of the photo pop. For example, we've talked about using elements of your background to make your photo a little bit more engaging, but you want to make sure that you are the one that is standing out in that image. So if you take your image and you upload it into Canva and you click to edit it, all you have to do is simply select the option of autofocus. Again, this is available on the free Canva version, and you can adjust the intensity of the autofocus if you like to. You can increase that, you can lower it, but this will just give you that depth of field in a photo that makes it look more professional than what it ordinarily would look. And while you are editing your photo, just have a look at the brightness of the photo as well. You don't want a photo that looks dark and uninviting. You want a photo that feels bright and professional. And for tip number 5, let's talk about some of the things that you might want to avoid in your LinkedIn profile photo. Firstly, although this is rare, you do see it from time to time, but I would suggest not including anyone else in your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn is not like Facebook in that sense. You want to make sure that you are just showcasing yourself as a professional in your industry, in your marketplace, in your LinkedIn profile header. It's only a really small space to work with on LinkedIn anyway, so make sure that you are using that to convey your professional brand in as clear a way as possible. My tip number 2, which actually is very common, is to not crop a photo that was taken at an event for your LinkedIn profile. Now, of course, if this was a professional event and it was a photo that was taken in that context, then that is probably most likely going to work in most instances. But what I mean is the photos that you have taken that are social photos, even at, work events, this could be the case. But sometimes people use photos that were taken in their social life, say at an event or a party that they went to that they think looks really good, and then they just crop themselves out of that photo, and that can look quite unprofessional, because while you might think that you look great in that photo, you've dressed your best, you have your best hair, makeup, all of those things, it actually is quite obvious to the people looking at it that it is a crop from a different photo. You just can tell a lot of the time that that is the case. And it shows a little bit of laziness in not taking the time to create something specific for your LinkedIn profile. And it also just doesn't come across as professional, because a lot of the time you're not actually dressed on those occasions the way that you should be in your day-to-day work, for example. Which leads me to something else to avoid, which is to make sure that you aren't dressing in any inappropriate attire. Again, you want to make sure that you are conveying yourself in a way that is professional and appropriate for your industry and your market. And finally, you also want to avoid any images that could potentially be seen as low quality. So anything that is blurry or pixelated or dark, or anything that comes across as you not putting in effort into the quality of your LinkedIn profile. If you want to learn more about how you can elevate your LinkedIn profile headline, then check out my previous episode on this topic. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.